Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting, hair-raising, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios. But sometimes we'll work on other stuff like television, stereos, record players. And today we have a 1951 Philips Capella 51. I'm guessing 51 must mean the year. It is a German-made Philips that has AM and FM and shortwave, I believe. Let's see. Maybe it's just AM and FM. Working condition, we do not know if it works or not. There's a decent chance it might. But what I'm going to do is bring it up slowly on the Variac. And let's put it to FM. And we'll bring it up just initially 50%. Let it sit there for a minute. I'm guessing this doesn't have any pilot lights since everything is on the front here. What a strange design. It's like there's felt glued on top of grill cloth, and I'm glad the grill cloth's in good shape because finding that would be difficult. The one thing this thing is interesting is that it has an enormous speaker that looks like probably at least a 10-inch speaker. So far nothing's happening, which it wouldn't at 50%. Let's bring it up just a little bit more. I don't hear any hum. All right, bring it up just a little bit more. Nobody's home. So probably what that means is that the main fuse is either corroded or blown. That's pretty common on these guys. So let's take the back off and see what's going on. Well, I found out why I wasn't getting anything. It's because the speaker's disconnected. Now, why it's disconnected, I'm not really sure. Doesn't bode well. That usually means the previous owner had an issue with it and they didn't resolve it. These feel a little warm, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook this back up. I assume that has to be speaker wires. Let's go ahead and solder those back on there and see. I'm going to alligator clip them on there rather. And I also hope that none of this fucking string here going to the tuning stuff is broken, because Lord knows that would be a nightmare. In fact, if the tuning string was broken on this, I'd probably just put it back in the case and let someone else do it. There's a lot of tubes in this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 tubes, not including the eye tube. That's 14. If you think about it, and this is a German model, and in Germany you were taxed on the amount of tubes that your set had, so someone paid a pretty penny. We've also got these pilot lights, and I'm not sure what they could possibly be doing, unless somehow that glass is backlit in some weird way that I haven't figured out. I bet they go in here. Yeah, they do. You can see the edges of the glass up there. So somehow these are supposed to go up here like that. So let me alligator clip this back in, and then we'll bring it up and see if we get any life out of it. It looks like we're missing an antenna. I'm not that concerned about that right yet. I just want to see if it has any life before I dig into this. Okay, let's try this again. Especially keep an eye on those pilot lights. Okay, we got pilot. So I didn't see a fuse in this unless it's internal somewhere. It's actually got quite a few pilot lights. There's probably another one that goes up here. That doohickey. Not seeing any filaments, but I don't have it up that much. Okay, I've got some tube filaments now. Okay. Now that's strange. I turned it off and it still continued to make a static noise. Let me hook up an antenna to see if it's got any life on at least AM maybe. All right, let's try this again.
Around the world, it can't simply be that this company or that be bored and want.
Seems to work. That's fucking weird. Why is it doing that? I don't know. Anyway, it looks like that my tuning slide indicator thingy is not connected, but the tuner is tuning. All right. It's a Phillips. What can I say? It's probably going to be all 2 tons of fun to work on, but I need to investigate to see what's going on. I did notice there's one new electrolytic here. Makes me wonder if someone's been in here already. In fact, I know they have. But then on the other hand, we got this shitty old tar cap here. And you can see the ends of it have melted. That's going to the transformer. That could be the across the line cap. So, in fact, I see a bunch of paper caps in here still, just on the top. Every time I work on one of these, I ask myself, why do I work on Phillips stuff? I'm guessing these are probably 250 microfarad electrolytic capacitors, and I see paper underneath. So they could be floating. That one's not. That one's directly to chassis. To be real careful because there's a bunch of tubes in here that would be difficult to get because these look like rim lock tubes. Let me pull one of these, see if it's a rim lock. It is. I can tell it's got like a shoulder down there. These are probably very similar to EL84s. Actually, we've got an RCA tube in here. It's odd. I've never seen an RCA rim lock like that. Probably not actually made by RCA. What do we got? Oh, shit. I can't believe I just did that. Oh, hell. I just completely broke that tube. Fuck. I hope we have some of these at the museum. I sure hope we do. I cannot believe that blows so bad. Fuck. All right, it turned out that we did, in fact, have one of these, and I'm going to gingerly put it back on the set. I want to make sure it still works and it's not a bad tube. I have no way of testing it. So let's fire it up again. That was scary. I was like, well, crap. I'm not going to be able to do anything now. But we'll find out whether or not it's still going to work in short order. Okay, good. it does still work. So now I'm going to take it apart, and I guess that guy's going to have to somehow come off of there. I think actually it's just held in via that thumb screw, maybe. Look at these cables. Whew. All kinds of stuff that if it broke would be an absolute disaster. All right, I'll shut up and we'll get this out of here. Well, the underside is kind of a mixed bag. It's been ever so slightly restored, as in a handful of capacitors have been replaced, and that's it. The original electrolytics are still in here, as are a great many of the old tar encapsulated capacitors. These guys, my experience with Philips capacitors is usually there's a value stamped into the tar. It's usually white, and oftentimes it's done in picofarads. So it'll be like, 10,000 picofarads versus 0.01 microfarads. Likewise, we've got a lot of these paper caps. Those are all probably super leaky. God, I forgot how unfun these are to work on. But I'm going to start with the electrolytics first. We've got 3 of them, and they are 50 microfarads each. And then it's just a matter of going through and individually replacing one cap at a time. Some of these are really buried in there. And these little things right here are super fragile. So getting these out of the way and trying to get down into some of these places, that's going to be real fun. Look at this elaborate tuning mechanism. It's like there's a flywheel and a fiber gear. I guess it makes it quieter. And that in turn goes into these 2 flexible metal plates that separate. I mean, that is over the top complexity. Like, you don't need that level of complexity. Just like this little thing here. Like, look at this. Turn that, and that turns. I mean, it's kind of cool from a kind of a steampunk mechanical aspect. But yeah, these are crazily overcomplicated for what they are. But let's begin. Stop blabbering, start replacing caps. So again, I'm going to start with these 2. The chassis ground is ground for both, so we don't have to worry about that. You can put our grounds anywhere we can find one. There's one here that I can use for the replacement. That's not a problem. And over here is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, because we've just got more stuff. We have like a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 different leads. So we'll have to figure out what to do there. I might install a terminal strip. We'll see. All right, this is where sometimes you got to be really careful, because I had suspicions about this one because I saw a fiber washer in between it and its bottom, and I noticed that there's a line going to its negative here. I know that's kind of hard to see. It's, come on phone, that right there, and that comes through the bottom here and goes all the way over here to this tie point, and then another line goes all the way out to the other side, and it looks like it goes onto one of the legs of the the transformer, unless I'm not tracing it accurately. But basically, that's not chassis ground at all. That's a floating ground. And so what I'm going to do is put my new electrolytic here on this terminal strip. That'll be the negative, and the positive I'm just going to run from, you know what, let me think about this for a minute. God, why do they do it this way? What would be the rational way of doing this? I think what I'm going to do is run the positive through this way and attach it to the, because I want a firm place for that electrolytic to go. Before I do that, I need to replace this capacitor. It's buried under there. Because once I put a capacitor in this area, I'm not going to be able to get there. Man, there's so much stuff to break in this thing. I just wanted to show you guys this because stuff like this makes me irrationally mad. Like, would you believe the way this came from the factory is that they had this capacitor, and look how skinny that lead is. They had this capacitor just soldered on the end of this wad of components. That's unreal. Like, it's just like suspended electronics. It's very, very janky. I mean, granted, this was probably a nice piece, and it'll probably sound amazing, but I just, that baffles my mind why you would construct something like that. Oh well. This guy is a 0.22 rated microfarad. Yeah, I think these guys are all fucked. You can see how the ends are coming off like that. This stuff makes a mess too when you break them. Well, I've gotten partially into it. I got one electrolytic replaced and 3 paper caps. And I'm reminded that radios like this, like every component you replace is like a little adventure because like it's so difficult to get to some of these. Like they're just digging some of this out of here is like real fun, especially when you're around lots of very fragile things that will break if you look at them. But just, you know, take your time. I think the more difficult caps are all going to be up in this area here, especially that guy. That definitely needs to be replaced. It's weird how deformed it is. I don't know, but what I'm going to do is actually temporarily stop on this and work on the case because it's actually pretty warm and sunny out there, and it's supposed to rain this weekend. And so I'd rather work on the cabinet with my nasty Old English and other stuff that makes a big mess out there so I can get it on the driveway. So let's go work on the case. All right, so I'm going to start on the case. One thing that's really annoying is that this has been sitting at the museum for over a year. I'm just now seeing this, but sitting in the sun like that, there was a piece of paper taped to the top of it. And so, of course, the tape deteriorated in the light, and you can see where the piece of paper was over the top of this. See how faded that is? That's just from 1 year sitting in the sun. But I'll try to do my best I can. I have Old English here, and I'm just going to liberally apply it like crazy on this. I'm sure this is going to be a thirsty finish, and I'm hoping I can make that fade just a little bit less apparent. And I also need to find a way to get that tape residue off of there. I'm going to try WD-40 or something. WD-40 works well on this kind of thing. But I think what I'll do is I'll just apply this on there as thick and heavy as I can and let it sit for a few minutes. Well, good news and bad news. Good news, I was able to get the tape off. I used WD-40 and steel wool. The bad news is that the finish is going on with the crows over there. Sounds like there's a crow war going on. Anyway, the finish is a little uneven, and you can definitely tell there's like areas of the finish that have failed, and that's soaking up the Old English. It's maybe not necessarily the worst look. I mean, the finish was not great when we got it in. But what I did is I just soaked the crap out of it with Old English, and I'm hoping I'm going to let it sit on there wet for a while, and what that'll do is increasingly even out the splotchiness a little bit more and more. I don't know what's in Old English. The stuff was at our house when I was a kid, obviously because we were rambunctious young boys and beat up all the furniture. So Mom had a bottle handy, but it sure is good stuff. All right, well, back to the chassis. I'll be honest, I was feeling not very motivated to work on this because it's such a pain. And I thought, well, maybe if I go work on the case for a little while, I'll feel better about it. And since the case actually looks halfway decent, I'm like, this will probably look pretty good when it's done. So now I have more courage to come back and start digging into the capacitors. So I'm going to replace this one first so I can get at this one. Because if I damage that little coil, like that's probably pretty bad news. Probably the radio won't work. So it looks like I can just bend this crap out of the way because it's just like flimsy little resistors. And then we can get to that big guy. And I think beyond that, the rest of the capacitors aren't near as bad to replace, but I think it's worth just getting the crappy ones out of the way first. All right, so I guess this is a positive thing of when my wife goes away on a business trip, which is I wind up spending a Friday night spending hours replacing capacitors and a Philips radio. So I'm mostly done here. The only thing left is I need to replace these two electrolytic capacitors. And I think what I'm going to do is maybe attach a terminal strip here so I have a good place for my negatives because I don't see anything here that is easy to attach to. I think I'll do that and then maybe call it quits for the evening, but good progress. Oh yeah, I think I'm going to test it at the end of the evening because I've been very, very, very careful to try to match each lead with each lead and do a good soldering job. But I mean, this is one of those chassis you could easily make a mistake and not even realize it. All right, so I guess I'm a glutton for punishment tonight. So it looks like everything's actually there's one more capacitor down here. I need to replace that, but I did replace the electrolytics. I just drilled a hole through the side of the chassis and put this bolt through. And then I really tightened it up and also soldered it to the chassis. And so that's the common ground for these two electrolytics that replaced those two. And so I think we're in good shape here as far as for a first evening. The next thing I want to do is oil everything that moves. For example, this business here. So I have this stuff here. It's great. It's called Zoom Spout Oil. I heard about it for years. And first of all, I was intrigued by its stupid sounding name, Zoom Spout Oil. But whatever it is, it's like works like a champ on this stuff. I think it's actually for fan motors or motors. But already that's like so much nicer. So what I do is I just basically get it into all the bearing surfaces that move. I'm not afraid to use more than you probably should. But I mean, that already feels so much smoother than it did. And part of the experience of using some of this stuff is a tactile sensation. And so what I'm going to do now is clean these pots. I'll clean the pots and the wafer switches. And then I'm going to turn it upside and oil the top bearings there. I think I'm done replacing caps for the night. So what I want to do is like clean all the contacts and everything and test fire it with the speaker and make sure that we're still working or if there's improvement, which there should be. Because a lot of these caps were they were hosed. Like you see that? That's melted capacitor. So something pretty tragic happened there. I'm amazed that the set worked at all, but who knows? We'll see. All right, so now that we've gotten top side, it's time to lubricate all of the pivot joints up here as well. So we've got all of these little pulleys. I'm just touching them with a tiny bit of oil. One there. Is that it? Let's see. That was one here as well. All right. Gotta admit, that feels nice. Like usually these weighted tuning mechanisms don't feel that great, but there's so much shit going on here. But I mean, like, yeah, if any of this like piano wire broke, I'd be so in trouble. Like, forget trying to restring that. That would never happen. Um, anyway, all this stuff is been cleaned up and oiled and everything, so I think it's ready to do a test fire. I sure hope it still works, because this is a lot of effort for so far. All right, it's do or die time. Got her all plugged in and everything. All right, I'm not sure what band I'm on, but I'll find out soon enough, assuming it still works. We got filament. It's hard to tell these things are dirty. Should, because the pilot lights are working. Jesus, fucking loud. All right, let me figure out what's going on. I think it wants to pick up, but I have the antenna probably hooked up wrong. All right, well, AM works, FM is out, and I think I know why, but I need to look up the schematic, because what's happened is the previous person that worked on this, they kind of did a poor soldering job. And so I checked my work and it was okay, but we've got this loose resistor plus globs of other components kind of like barely soldered together, and like it's just a rat's nest. And without having a schematic in hand, like I'm just shooting in the dark, because this is not your typical AA fab that I work on. But I think I'm going to let it go for the night. I made good progress today, and we'll tackle this tomorrow or the next day or whenever it happens. Okay, it is the morning after the first day of working on the set, and I decided to kind of clear my mind. And also I downloaded the schematic so I can take a look here, and I see here that we've got a lot of components that have worked themselves loose because of the previous person's not very good soldering skills. This huge orange drop has come loose. This resistor has come loose. And I think I can guess where they probably go, but I don't want to damage anything in the set, so I'm going to have to do is look at the schematic. And the problem areas is I can trace it down to the leads that are coming off of what appears to be a transformer and a tube socket. I'll need to flip it over in order to figure out which tube that is, but if I can look on the schematic and pinpoint it down to there, then I could probably restore FM. I mean, I'm looking here, and a lot of these leads from the previous person, they're just laid on top of each other and barely tacked on. So probably when I was in here replacing parts, I must have knocked these guys loose. And so I need to restore that connection. I'm actually going to take it into the museum. I've got a few things I'm working on at the same time that may or may not need assistance from some of the other volunteers. But it'd be nice to get this figured out. I don't think it's necessarily going to be difficult to fix. It's just a matter of making sure I connect the right things to the right connections versus how they are now. I know that sounds stupid, but that's the case. Well, welcome back to I think the second or third day of working on the Philips. Excuse me. And I have an embarrassing admission to make, which is, so basically AM was working, FM was not. And I could not figure out what was going on. And so I took it into the museum to see if sound or minds could help. And we poked through the schematic and tried to cancel out every other situation that possibly could have gone wrong. And we finally, after about 2 Saturdays of picking at it, finally found the issue. I can't even find it because it's buried in there. Oh, here it is. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but underneath this bar here, there's an RF transformer. One of the leads that I'd clipped out to put in one of the new capacitors, when I put the new capacitor in, I must have bent the old part of the old lead out of the way and forgot about it. And it was shorting against the lead that goes to the grid of one of the EF42 tubes. And so the grid was getting 170 volts. We noticed that tube was getting quite warm. Amazingly, it didn't do any damage. So now FM is fully restored. The set seems to be working pretty well. So now what I'm going to do is add an audio input. This is obviously the speaker output. This is going to that output transformer. This is the antenna, so that means by default this has to be the input down here. And boy, is that difficult. Everything is difficult to get at on this thing. Let's see. One of them's going to be chassis ground. There we go. That's chassis ground. That's going to the ground of that tube. The one on the top here. I know you guys can't see this. You'll just have to take my word for it. But if I want to cheat, what I can do is I can see the lead. The lead at the bottom of the input goes to here off of the selection switch. That makes sense. Probably one of those is phono selection. So we'll put the positives with my audio input here. The negative needs to go to whatever ground is available. And then I believe it's going to be time to maybe work on the cabinet a little bit more. And then we'll reinstall everything. Probably my intention is to have this done by Monday. We had a lot of activity yesterday at the museum. We had a swap meet, and a lot of people just wound up donating hordes of things to us. And plus, I have a lot of other projects that are kind of in the pipeline right now. I have those 2 consoles, that console, that console. And I have 2 other consoles that people want me to restore for them. I kind of twisted my arm, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And I have a whole bunch of table sets, and those have priority because we have a show that we're going to put on in a few weeks. So it's pretty busy around here. It seems like whenever I think we're going to run out of sets to work on, more appear. It's just nonstop, but that's good. If you're addicted to this hobby like I am, you get your fix. Absolutely a bassy pounding machine. It does not like my fluorescent lights though. It's very obvious as soon as I turn them on. You can hear it. Maybe it's not as bad, but anyway, it was earlier. Oh, it's time to put it back in the cabinet. I want to get this guy done, and so I can move on to other stuff. Well, I thought I was done, and then I plugged it up, and these cords, now granted, I buy them cheap. About 1 out of every 5 shorts out somewhere around here. Not very good quality, so I got to cut that out of there and put a new one in. Luckily, I can access it by this. I had to do a few other things here. There's a light that illuminates the band indicator, that little rolly thing that's green up here. It was missing the bracket, so I had to make one to install that. And then I made an antenna, basically a dipole antenna for FM. So I'm going to remove the bottom and remove this cord and put another one in it. Maybe this is one that's shorted and I'd put it back in even though I forgot to throw it away. Knowing me, that's probably it. Alright, well, it's all back together again, and man, this was a challenging project, but sometimes that's what keeps you honest and keeps you humble. I certainly felt humbled by this guy, but it is a good sounding machine for sure.
Don't be nervous, don't get excited. It may all turn out to be just a dream. If you should come home late some night and find a stranger there, visiting your little wife, let on that you don't care. Don't blow your top and rant and rave as a jealous husband would. She will say that you are wrong, that you misunderstood.
Good old Tommy Duncan. I love all of his stuff. Part of the Texas Playboys, if you're not familiar with them. If you ever heard any of those country troubadour songs where there's a guy that goes, oh ho! Well, that's Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, one of the earliest Texas swing duos. Came out of Texas, of course. I think originally sang for a flour making company. Can't remember. Anyway, this is not a music show. This is a show about radios. And it looks like this one's good to go. I'm going to let it sit here for maybe a couple hours, make sure nothing's going to blow up. And if it doesn't, then it'll be sent out into the wild blue yonder, or it might be a museum piece. I was told that we might consider it because it is uncommon for here. The person that bought this, I believe, one of our members, was originally from Europe and would travel home to see his family and would occasionally bring a plane back on the plane. And this is where that came from. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. If you have any questions or comments, I'll try to get to them below. Until the next time something comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.